Hi everyone and welcome to week 13. This week we are looking at the management of knowledge systems. This is the outline of what we'll cover. We'll start off with looking at maintaining and updating authority controls. Then we'll move on to managing systems, then security, then evolving and migrating information systems, and then finally we'll take a look at knowledge networks. So this week it's all about how you manage and maintain information systems such as databases or catalogs or any other type of information systems that groups may use or institutions may use. So one of the main things that you have to do as somebody who's involved in organizing information or cataloging or descriptive activities, if you have a database or another system where information is presented and accessed, you need to maintain your authority controls. And whenever you think of authority controls, you should think of controlled vocabularies or controlled lists that would contain entries that are controlled. So we have a preferred way of entering information, and we came across these variously. We looked at creator names or author names. That's obviously named entities such as people, institutions, such as the Association for Information Science and Technology. That is a named entity that could be controlled. You can also have named entities for place names, very common, obviously, because you can imagine Constantinople and Istanbul are names of the same place, but those names have been used variously across time, and so you need to choose a preferred term that you will use within your information system. Otherwise, as you're all aware, I hope at this point, individuals would have to search on every variation that could possibly exist to ensure that they retrieved everything that the system contained on that topic. Other authority controlled lists could be subject heading lists, such as the Sears list or the Library of Congress's subject heading list. Thesauri of controlled terms, indexes with indexing terms, classification schemes, those codes, lists for types of materials, media, object type. All of those can be contained in controlled lists. You are introduced to a number of them, like the name authority file at the Library of Congress, the Library of Congress subject heading again, the Getty vocabularies, all of those vocabularies, they all need to be maintained. In your own particular institution, you may use multiple controlled vocabularies. Every time a new entry is made, that is an author name that is not represented in your catalog, or a term that's being applied in your catalog for the first time, or an index term that's being applied for the first time in your catalog, or a subject heading that's being applied in your catalog, you will need to create an authority file for that term or name. After that has occurred, you may find that the term or the name has been changed, and you'll have to modify it in your system. Or you may find that there was a mistake in the original entry that was made when it was the authority record itself in your information system may not have been complete, or maybe there was a typographical error, or new information is discovered about the individual or about whatever the topic is. And so at some period in time, you will need to go in, or will need to go in and update the original authority record that was created. You may also find that there are instances when authority records need to be deleted. It might be that you no longer have an item in your collection that's represented or a representative item by a particular author. Well, you'd probably want to go in and remove that authority record if there are no records in your catalog that are being represented for that individual. So all of those types of activities have to occur to maintain your authority controls. It just makes your information system run like a fine-tuned machine when you do that. There are some problems with, or complications, common complications to authority control changes, such as relationships between subject headings. As you've seen, there are broader and narrower relationships, and there are also relationships that are conceptual in nature. They need to be updated as well. If you change a heading and those relationships are described in that record, or were described in the record before it was updated, you need to make sure that those relationships are still maintained, or they may be changed, because that can sometimes happen, that previously it might have been in a scientific taxonomy that a organism was previously thought to be related, and now it is no longer related. It was discovered it isn't related. As you may have heard recently, there are various drafts, and they were all thought to be like basically cousins of one another, but in fact the relationship is not, it's not that way. So now somebody would need to go in, if they were working with the taxonomy that included these various kinds of giraffes, they would need to go in and update those authority records to show that that relationship had changed. So that's one of the it's not as straightforward as just changing an authority record. You also have to change those relationships. So that can be something that you need to be aware of when you update records, authority records. Another complication is the fact that the approval process for national or international authority control agencies, such as when you have the Library of Congress's subject headings, or the Library of Congress's name authority file, or the Getty artist name file, or the geographic place name file, all of those, since they're national and international in scope, they have a very lengthy vetting process where numbers of individuals and organizations actually have to agree on what the update will be. So it's a lengthy process. So that means that any changes or additions can take time. And so you may be kind of held in the balance there. Many institutions will add the record or the term, and then they will go back in and update it when it's actually been approved to whatever the approved term or name may be. Just know that there can often be a delay, for a new author or something of that nature. It might take a while before it appears. You go in, you create your authority record, and then you update it. On the other hand, for terminology that may be new terminology that is kind of cutting edge research, now we have a new term. It will take a while for that term to appear in whatever collective authority agency list is out there. It will take time. And that is obviously problematic. But again, you can add it in an authority record within your local information system. Just be aware of the fact that it may take time for it to appear, and then you may have to go back and update your record so that you're in alignment with whatever those collective authority decisions are. Classification is also something that you need to maintain. And in that case, when you have classification schemes or new classes added or shifts in the classification scheme, it can be very difficult to deal with, because it can be your entire collection has to shift now, because everything that had previously been in another class now needs to move to another area. And then obviously it's not like you can just push things down a few shelves in most libraries, unless it's a fairly new library and there has been a lot of space left in each aisle for growth. Then you might only have to shift an aisle or two. But if you have to shift a library, it is a very involved process, and then all the shelf tags need to be changed, and don't forget the spine labels. Often if you're shifting one from one place to another, those books all have to be relabeled. The records also need to be updated within your information system. It can be a very labor-intensive process. Typically it's done, if it's an academic library, it'll be done in a period over the summer when the library sees the least amount of use. But if it's in an organization or another institutional setting, you need to be aware of what effect that will have on your user community and try to plan for it to be as least disruptive as possible. You can also do rolling or staggered reclassification, which means you go kind of class by class to do it. Instead of kind of shifting everything at once, you would do it one area at a time. And then you can also do it when you only accession new items, so that you're accessioning new items and you're adding them to whatever class change has been made, and that things that are old, although they could potentially be shifted to the new classification or the new class, they stay where they are. It's really not a terrible thing, except for the fact that not everything is co-located within your collection. As long as people are using the catalog, they'll understand that these materials are filed in two places so that they can go to both places to look. Eventually, there'll be very few items that are left in the old location through the process of weeding, especially in domains where you see lots of turnover and there's lots of research being done and things get outdated quickly. Those will fall off pretty quickly. So that's how you deal with maintaining authority control in information systems. You also have to deal with system maintenance. And here we're talking about databases, catalogs, those digital libraries, those types of systems. So you have to ensure that the system is functioning as it should be functioning, so individuals can search for items and retrieve items in the way that they're supposed to. It also means that you have to ensure that the software for the system is being updated, that you're maintaining the hardware, so the machines that the system runs on, both in terms of the server side of things and also on the user side of things within your institution. So people come to the library, they're looking for a particular book, they go to your online catalog through whatever dedicated computers that you have in your public library, and they search. Well, those systems, those computers also have to be maintained. They have to be bug-free. They have to be functional. The screens have to work. The keyboards have to work. All of those things require maintenance, especially when it's a public machine and lots of people are using it. They get a lot of use. They can get bugs in them, so you have to make sure that not only the system is being maintained, but how people access the system, at least from within the walls of your institution. You have to deal with those hardware issues. You have to make sure that there are backups of your data files. Nothing will make people more upset within your institution than finding out that all of the cataloging that has been done for the past 25 years has just been lost because there is no backup of the data file. That obviously would make many people very, very angry. Need to back up? Multiple backups, at least 3. One of which is preferably not in your geographical region in case there are issues of like natural disaster nature, such as tornadoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, those types of things. Because if all 3 of your backup files are all stored in the same general region, even if one is on site, one is 2 miles away, if there's a tsunami and that tsunami floods everything, those copies are going to be useless. So you should have one that's someplace at a distance in the cloud. You want to make sure there's multiple backups, different locations. You also need to deal with troubleshooting computers and the systems and malfunctions of the software, hardware, and systems. You also have to liaise with software and hardware companies. So if you're running a particular software on for your catalog, say, or for your digital library, you will be in contact with the software company pretty frequently when they'll be telling you about updates and bugs and fixes and things that are coming. They want feedback from you. They want to know what it is, what features that you feel should be prioritized, because systems are never static. They're always growing. They're always developing. Features are being added or removed if they're not really useful or if they're causing problems. And you also have to, if you're in an institutional setting, obviously you have multiple machines, and so you'll be needing to have a pretty close relationship to various hardware companies, since they need to ensure that your machines are functioning properly as well. And then you also have to deal with networking issues. So whether it's wired connections or wireless connections, you need to ensure that the networking of the machines is functioning properly and that there aren't any security breaches to your systems or machines. So speaking of security, we need to ensure access to only authorized users of the system. And as you're probably all aware, everyone has different levels of access within a system. So individuals who are staff members will have a very different level of access to the library catalog than a patron would. And even staff members within a library, not everybody will have the same levels of access. So only the individuals that are catalogers, obviously, will have the ability to add records, to create records, or modify records, or to delete records. You don't want your patrons to have those abilities because they could wipe out entire sections of your catalog. You don't want that to happen. So that is something that somebody needs to control. Some administrator of the system needs to be able to enroll individuals, provide them with a login, or if it's a basic level of access that you don't have to log into the system, such as a catalog, you need to make sure that that basic level of access, those individuals don't have the ability to do things like modify records. You also can provide different features to individuals. You can also provide the ability to do things like print reports or not, or records or not, or email records, select records. You just need to know what the various levels of access are in the system and what particular individuals will be given those levels of access. You also have to make sure that the data within your system is authentic and that its integrity has not been breached. So you can imagine in a banking situation where you have an information system, you would want to make sure that the data that was in that banking system hadn't been tampered with, so that your loan amount didn't have few extra characters added on the end of it, or perhaps that a few extra zeros haven't been added to your bank account. While it might sound great to you, sounds good to me, on the side of the bank, obviously, it's not so good. So you really need to make sure that the data that's within your system is protected and that your system cannot be hacked and the data manipulated within the system. You need to make sure that you're protecting confidential information, such as individuals' addresses, phone numbers, social security numbers, names, dates of birth. All of that kind of personal information should be protected. But there are all sorts of other types of confidential information, such as donor information, how much money they gave, what their name and address and phone number are, what their bank account numbers are. That type of information really needs to be highly protected. You also need to make sure that there are no hacks into your system, that there are no accidental or deliberate attacks onto your system, such as corruption of your software, theft. Obviously, people can come and steal your server, and there goes your catalog. You have to make sure that there aren't network overloads, problems with the destruction of your data or the loss of your data. So again, loss, destruction, corruption of your data, the integrity of the data. As long as you have a good backup plan in place, if that does happen, you always have to be thinking ahead to what would you do if X occurs, because X can occur. We know this happens. So you always have to think in terms of how would you recover from whatever disaster occurred, in security, in hardware problems, in software problems. Things break. Systems get breached. Data gets hacked. You attempt, and as best as you can, you attempt to reduce all of those problems, but they do happen. So you need to have a contingency plan in place for how you're going to deal with those, if in fact they do happen. Very important in terms of security. Also, in information organizations, you need to plan and perform user support. So that means that you're helping individuals use the system. That may mean staff members, the general public, scholars, whoever it is that interacts with your information system or systems will need to be supported, whether that's through training. So you help people use the system by training them to use the system. The training can be in person, could be a classroom situation, could be one-on-one situation, could be through videos, brief videos, could be through PDF files of, how you do things step by step, could be through a podcast, could be through screenshots. All of that type of training and documentation is something that falls under this heading of user support. Another way that you provide user support is through the interface design. As information professionals, you are likely not the person that will be asked to develop the system, but you certainly have a better understanding of the individuals who will use that information system, and you will need to act as a liaison between the system designer or the software developer and your patrons. So you need to really insert yourself in discussions surrounding things like interface design and what fields may actually be within the information system. You know your users, you know what type of information they're seeking. You need to ensure that the system actually has the data and the interface design that will meet the needs of the users. You also have to provide help desk or in-person support to users. Another thing that you need to be aware of is the fact that systems are never stagnant. They will evolve. Sometimes systems outlive their useful life and they will need to be retired. And at that time, you will need to think of ways to migrate your data and content. It could be a digital library which has all sorts of digital materials embedded within the system. You'll need to find a way to migrate all of that content, the data and the digital files themselves, out of that system and put them in a new system. So you have kind of two things that happen when you have information systems. You have the system design, so you have to think about what the objective of the system is, what are the services and features that are within that system, and what the architecture of that system is. So kind of the relationship between tables within the system, the relationship between hierarchical fields within the system, how perhaps if we're talking about a digital library, how are the digital files integrated within the system. That's the system design part of things. And then you have the methodologies surrounding information system development. You have things like prototyping. So that's like creating mock-ups of what the system may look like so that people can get a sense of how they would work through whatever the typical things are that they do in the system. Application software packages, end user development, object-oriented development. These are all kind of different methodologies that you work through when you're going through information system development. This whole area is a course unto itself. System design is wonderful. The methodologies that are used can vary depending on the type of institution and who will actually use the system and what the system is used for. The methodology is often tightly coupled to that context. You also have to deal with the fact that any change that occurs of, the evolution of the system, whether it be like a newer version of the system, or if you have to migrate from one system into a newly developed system or a new to the institution system, you will have to deal with people when that change occurs. And so you need to plan for that change, work through the implementation of the change, and then help people adjust to the change. So this is a whole course unto itself, how you cope, how you plan for, what the costs are associated with it, how much time it's going to cost, what resources are available to help with the change, to support the development or the migration. You have to deal with what risks are involved and evaluate the risks and what the cost benefits are for making the change or evolving to a newer system. You have to deal with who will be affected, what will occur, when will it occur, where will it occur, why it will occur, how it will occur. All of these questions need to be asked and answered in managing that change that will occur. You also have to be aware of the fact that change is not easy. For many, many reasons, it isn't easy. And people will often be resistant to change, and you'll need to kind of plan for what different motivators you will use to help people accept the change. One of the most important things that you can try to do if you need to migrate to a new system is involve as many stakeholders as you can within the process of selecting the system or developing the system, because you need buy-in. If individuals don't want to use the system, it's likely they will try to avoid using the system, and that can be really problematic if you're talking about your patron base, or if you're talking about 3/4 of your staff members just refuse to use the system or won't use the system because it's too cumbersome or it's too painful or what have you. And there have been cases where this occurs, and it can be a pretty disastrous situation. You want to try to avoid that. The final topic that we'll look at today is knowledge networks, and there are many different kinds of knowledge networks. They can be institutional, so you can have library to software connection relationship. You can have library to hardware. You can have library to institution. You can have association and library, association organization, library, museum, library archive, library. There's a whole host of entities out there that are all about the knowledge economy, whether that's books or journals or computer files or artwork or natural history collections or archival materials, photographs, manuscripts, organizational documents. All of those items, all of the people, all of the systems, they're all intertwined. And so, our main aim and what we have looked at this entire course has been to make information as easily accessible as possible to users, so that the users themselves don't have to expend so much of their time and effort trying to find the information that they need to fulfill whatever need it is they have. In these networks of knowledge and information, it's like a matrix, and we are all working within that matrix. So we want to be able to share that knowledge within those networks. There's a secondary aim to that, and that's the ability to share the workload. And that's one of the main reasons why MARC was developed, so that we could share catalog records among various institutions, so everyone wasn't doing the same work. Yes, every library will tweak their catalog records so that it meets their particular needs. However, all of the data entry does not have to be rekeyed in every single library around the world. There really is a reason why there are knowledge networks and why we share our records, because it just is a way to lessen all of the work surrounding the knowledge and information within our various institutions. In the past, it would be limited to exchanges between libraries and publishers and organizations and, our patrons, and that was basically it. But in the present time, the way that knowledge is exchanged, there can be free content that's exchanged via the internet. Now, whether or not it's all exchanged legally, obviously, is a question we all need to grapple with, because it is disrupting our traditional business models, and in some ways that's wonderful, but in other ways, publishers in the past, they have been the people who were basically kind of the gatekeepers of knowledge by and large, because they were the ones who said what was authoritative and worth actually distributing. And now, since that's no longer the case, you have a lot of false or less weighty or less well developed, maybe that's a better way to put it, information that's being pushed out and published outside of the publication world or publishers realm, and that can be a wonderful thing, because more people can express their opinion and more people can contribute within that type of network. However, on the other side, it means you have false information being pushed as real information. You have misinformation and disinformation being presented in much the same way as really authoritative information. So that can create a pretty problematic situation. So you have to think about what that means for users. In the past, somebody in a library would have had to have made the decision whether or not to purchase a particular resource. Now that is not often the case. I mean, within libraries, yes, but users are often barraged with a lot of information, and in some cases the users don't have enough knowledge to know whether or not that information that they're examining is authoritative real or authoritative unreal or just plain wrong. So it is problematic in a number of ways, but it's also the great democratizer. Anyone can have access to information that has access to the internet. You also have to add that caveat. So that is basically what the knowledge network is all about. And it's something that we really need to think about in terms of the future of information and its place within society. So we have reached the last slide of the last lecture of the semester. So I wanted to wish you all good luck on your group project, on the final exam, which I will announce next week when it's available. And I also wanted to wish you good luck in whatever courses you may have left at Wayne State University, and also good luck in your future career if our paths don't meet again. You've been a great group, and I've really enjoyed having you. Bye.